always this like Nigerian-born Eni. When you win, it's like, oh yeah, she's one of us.
There won't be a black middle class in the UK. There's something about middle class culture in Britain that is inherently white and white coded.
I reject this idea that there has to be a proximity to whiteness. For me, I see it as, what do you earn? Can I own property? If you can do all of these things as part of British culture, you are part of the middle class. We do have to have strategies as to how we're going to earn money, to then have influence, to then make change.
I don't think we need to presume that money needs to come before the change. The change can happen without money.
Hello, welcome to Think Twice. My name is Benno.
My name's Benz and Tef.
If you've never watched us before, the show is about morals, dilemmas, and ethics, and basically based in philosophy. And the reason why I'm saying that is because I think we have some new people today who don't care what I have to say, or don't really care what Tef has to say.
No.
But they care what this footballer, lawyer, media personality, and philanthropist, and most importantly, Ted Lasso star, has to say. Hey, welcome, Eni.
Thank you.
Welcome,
Thank you for
Eni.
having me. That's my claim to fame, the Ted Lasso stuff.
Yeah.
Everything else, just ignore the rest.
And also the first female pundit on Match of the Day, which is
That's massive.
which is
Pioneer.
unbelievable, isn't it?
Yeah, that was a long time ago. That was like, what, 10 years ago now? Yeah, 2014.
You still look young as ever. Today we're going to discuss Black Britain and various different things within Black Britain, which brings us to the first question. Will there ever be a significant black middle class in the UK?
I would like to think there is already one. I just don't think that it's established in the way that I think, we think of middle class.
Yeah.
But certainly I think in Britain, you are seeing, more black and brown, ethnic minority children, young people going to Russell Group universities.
Yeah.
I think it's important to define what middle class is.
100%.
Right? Because
100%. And we'll do that. For sure.
there was this whole debate. I think Kemi Badenoch recently talked about, I was working class when I worked for McDonald's. But ultimately, it's quite a simple definition. Working class is, the working person. If you have
using
to
your
work,
labour to
you
make
have
money.
to work to make money, right? So that is pretty much it. My background is law. I studied law, became a lawyer. I don't think I became middle class as soon as I became a lawyer.
Right.
But if you become established in that field, you can then buy a house. You can then travel. Then your social mobility moves from sort of a certain level of income to now a higher level of income, which then opens and unlocks you to do certain things.
Agreed.
You can invest in property. So that I see more of in terms of the Black community, and I'm very, very happy about that.
Yeah.
Because, I think we work extremely hard.
Yeah.
And the rewards of that is, or should be, so for me, social mobility.
Yeah, I agree. I think you touched on a lot of the markers of the economic middle class, which is higher education, white collar working. So you don't necessarily use your physical labor to earn money. You use your degree or your connections built in higher education. I think economists would use that definition for middle class. But I think the more difficult one to define is what is culturally middle class. And I think when I answered the question, my answer was no, that there won't be a black middle class in the UK.
Same, you're kind of on your ones on this one, then.
Yeah.
Oh, you think there is?
I don't think there will be either.
No.
Okay.
I think you're definitely right, and I agree with you that a lot of black people, especially second generation immigrants, have done quite well to access higher education and potentially get these sort of white collar jobs and open the pathway for home ownership and economic prosperity. But I think there's something about middle class culture in Britain, to me, that is inherently white and white coded.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah,
for
and
sure.
I don't think that allows, in a cultural sense, for blackness and African heritage to be appropriately recognized and appreciated, which is part of why I said that there won't be technically a black British middle class.
So give me an example of what you associate with culturally white middle class.
I would say culturally white middle class, it's all about the way like people present in the world. So it's about the way they talk. There's a proximity to like the Queen's English, for example. It's about the way they dress. So you might dress a certain way and you might behave more conservatively in certain public spaces. And I think a lot of these things are difficult to like quantify and define and be like, that is middle class. But there's a sense of proximity to whiteness in a lot of these spaces and institutions that I would associate with the British middle class. It's also geographically quite focused. So if you, in certain parts of London, you'd say that is a middle class suburban community, and you could distinguish that from a black working class community, which is in the inner city. So it's difficult to define, but like I would hold on to those markers.
I think it's interesting because that's why I asked what you define, what you see that as, right? Because I think if you were just to take London and you were to take, you know, what I would say is middle class areas like West London, there's obviously a predominance of white people and white professionals. But I think for those black people who, as I said, have broken into those industries, they live in Richmond, they live in Chelsea, Wimbledon. Like numerically, obviously, there's less of us, but we can break into those spaces without barriers. So I reject this idea that there has to be a proximity to whiteness. For me, I see it as, what do you earn? Can I own property?
Sure.
I think that is a huge signal of what class you're in.
Sure.
And do I have financial freedom to book a table at a middle class place without barriers? If you can do all of these things culturally, for me, as part of British culture, you are part of the middle class.
I do think there's an element though of needing to appreciate how white people would see us. So like you say, a lot of the markers of economic, like whether we're middle class or not, the three of us in this room, we have all of those markers. And economically, we are middle class. But if you were to ask a family from those areas that you're talking about,
A white family,
am I part of the British middle class? There's a gap there, and that gap is race.
Why do we need to center what they think?
I agree.
I don't care.
Well, we live in a white patriarchy, so like I think when you live in a white supremacist culture, what the predominant culture believes you to be impacts your daily life.
Of course, but I'm saying their view and opinion is one thing. What you can prevent me from doing is another. If I want to go to Wimbledon, if I want to send my child to private school, if I want to do all the things that you can do as a white middle class person in Britain, if I can do it without barrier based on what you think doesn't matter.
Sure.
Because there is a culture and a society that actually allows you to scale if you work hard enough. I hear you, because there's always going to be pushback.
Yeah.
And that white supremacist system and structure means that it's like you're pushing against something here that's quite set.
Yeah.
But I don't feel that there's lots of barriers to that. And I think
I think there are though, because if you think about and maybe me using the white middle class family as the marker or the barometer for like our judgment is the wrong like example. I think it's probably more useful to look at institutions.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
Like how institutions treat black people. Because institutions obviously have a massive impact on our daily lives and our prospects and our opportunities. But also these institutions are large groups of people. It's not just like an individual making a judgment of you. Is sort of an entrenched way of being within the institution. So something like a workplace. There was a study done, like I think it was like 10 years ago, about job applications with an African name versus job applications with a white name. And it's like the amount...
why people change their name, yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And it's like, that is an example where I am being judged unfairly, and the access I have to that social mobility is being impacted because of an African name. And I think institutions do have the ability to hinder our social mobility.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
But I do think we're slightly missing the point here.
Okay.
Because what you guys have been discussing is, can like an individual become middle class? And I don't think anyone would disagree with that. It's more like, can a community, a reasonable amount of people be middle class in the UK that are black?
Yeah, I hear that.
And I think they're just two slightly different things. So like, and the reason why I agreed with Tef was sort of because the number of black people in the UK is so low.
It's 3%, right?
Exactly. There's just not many. And then mixed black, because if you look at the US, because the US is probably the best example of like a black middle class within a white supremacy.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, absolutely.
And mixed race people in the US are viewed as black, whilst mixed race people in the UK have a slightly different nuanced experience. Like it sort of depends on the black figure in that family. That's like quite a crucial part, particularly what part of the UK where they were born. If they were born in London, they might feel more black because they're around more black people than
100%.
The way they're socialized.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's hard to count mixed race people in the black community in the UK as you would in the US. Like obviously there still are people, but it's just slightly different. And then probably the point that I think is the most crucial point is the creation of the black family. Like the black experience in the UK is very different to that of the US. The US black experience is quite homogenous. Like a lot of the black Americans have experienced segregation, slavery, and then have cultural norms the same as other black people in the US, whilst in the UK, you have people from Africa, then different countries in Africa, alongside the Caribbean, then different countries in the Caribbean. And they're all just slightly different. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah.
Maybe.
So it's not, I definitely agree with you. It's not homogenous in the same way I think in the US. And there is less of us. And I think it's also, our journey's different. Like, say if you're African, you have somewhere to go back to, right? I think in the US, there is a lot of people, black people in the US who just identify as American.
Yeah.
African American.
So their experience with the white supremacist culture is different.
Yeah, agreed. I do think that sort of the liberation from like white capital, essentially, and the generation of a black economy, I think that's a big part of what could be considered the future of a black, black middle class in this country.
And we're heading. I would like to think we're heading towards that. I'm trying to make an investment right now in a property, and I said to myself, actually, this time I'm going to try and find people in venture capital who are black. There were so many VCs. I think that's what we consciously need to do. For me, that's the solution. We need to be more conscious about like the economy that we're creating within ourselves.
Full disclosure, I'm pretty anti-capitalist. Like, I'm not.
That's fine.
Yeah, I can't. There's something about capitalism to me that excludes the people at the bottom. Like I say, the three of us here, we've got economic opportunities that put us in the top strata of our own black community. But I think capital begets capital. So if you don't have capital to begin with, and you are, working class without a lot of economic prospects, which a lot of people in this country who are black, that's the situation they describe themselves in, it's difficult to get out of that. And you could get out of it, but it's kind of like survivorship bias. You've made it out, but it doesn't mean that the conditions in which you were put were fair. And I think we should try
how do you navigate a capitalist structure? If you don't like capitalism, what's the solution to that? How do you make money?
Well, no, we're on a podcast right now. This is like, between me and Benz, this is technically a capitalist venture.
Right.
It doesn't mean that like I completely like detract from capitalism and don't buy clothes or don't buy food. It's just like I move in capitalism with the knowledge and the appreciation that what I'm doing and my participation in capitalism isn't ethical, but it's a situation that I'm forced to be in. And I have to hold both thoughts in my mind at the same time. And at times it's quite uncomfortable. But overall, I just think a system that exploits workers' labor can never be the ultimate destination for liberation. Do you see my point? I just think there's other solutions that we can come to that are community-based and where everyone has a seat at the table and it's all funded by everyone in a certain community. For example, the black economy, to me, is a great example of an opportunity that black people have to start from the ground up. Like, we could do it all over again.
100%.
We could do it in a different way
100%.
to like the capitalism we see out in the world. We get the opportunity to reinvent like what economy, trade, and like all these things actually mean. And as we keep talking about like some further segments, we'll touch on like some examples of the way that black people can do this in media, in business. So I'm not gonna drag out this segment too long.
No, I like that. I like that.
But to Benz's point that he made earlier about the black family being an important institution in any sort of black middle class, I think another important institution that Americans have that we don't have in the UK is the HBCU.
Oh my God, yeah.
And like, I think the HBCU is a brilliant way for Black Americans and African Americans to appreciate their culture and to learn a pro-Black worldview at a young age. Because we go to schools, Benz and I went to a secondary school that was predominantly white, and
Same.
it's not pro-Black. You know what I mean? It's not, none of these institutions are gonna teach us like pro-Black attitudes and pro-Black worldviews. And to me, and if you're in a white culture that is inherently anti-Black, you need to learn pro-Black behavior. You need to learn pro-Black history.
100%.
And in the absence of that, I don't see how the UK can build that backbone of a culture that appreciates African descent and African tradition. So it's another reason why I don't know if we'll get to a place where in this country we're going to have a distinct Black middle class.
I don't think we should hold our breath on that.
Yeah.
That brings us on to our next question.
Okay.
Is Black ownership of media essential for Black progress?
100%.
I agree.
100%. You go from talent to IP owners.
Yeah.
You know, intellectual property is the asset. And so if you own that, that's the value. I think it's very much accepted now that we're brilliant talent in sport and entertainment. They're happy to pay us to be talented and come on their platform. But now we've got to move into producing, creating, owning.
100%, yeah.
What do you think Black people get as a result of all of those things? Like, I know in essence, like, all those things are important. What is the like tangible goal at the end that you see?
Value, money.
Yeah.
And ownership. For me, that's the epitome of value, is to have an idea, create it, produce it, share it with the world and sell it to whoever wants to buy it. Like, I don't know, maybe I'm missing something, but for me,
I just looked at it from like a slightly different perspective. Like, because I think we can make money.
Sorry, it's also the legacy of that, right?
I think I broadly agree with you about the ownership. I think the most important thing for me is like the story, the narrative around like the Black existence. If that's controlled by white people, inherently there's going to be misrepresentation there. Like they can't encapsulate what it truly means to be Black in whatever context that we're talking about, whether it's, you know, newspapers, video media, all that sort of stuff. If I leave the narrative of, you know, the Black experience to a white person catering to a majority white audience,
we have to reclaim that.
Ain't gonna go right.
We have to reclaim that
100%.
narrative.
That's essentially the issue with shows like Top Boy.
Yeah, exactly. That's a massive
What's
hit.
the issue?
Well, it was the producers and the people that wanted to push whatever narrative were white. And
Really?
there was like...
I thought Drake owned it.
Well, he's obviously the most
on
famous
board,
name involved in it. But like, Drake wasn't in the writing room, for example.
I didn't know that.
And
it's written by white
so people like Kano had an issue with it, and like Ashley Waters had an issue with the direction of the show because of these people writing it.
But do you not think that we are responsible for that? Because we all bought Top Boy, we all watched it, we all made it top of Netflix. So we're feeding into the narrative.
I don't think Black people made Top Boy #1 on Netflix charts. I think white people did.
But nonetheless,
Because it's a UK show, right? You can't get to the top of the charts Unless
That's
white people
very
fuck
true.
with it.
But nonetheless, like I don't think that's because of. I think it's in spite of Kano, Ashley Waters, and that made the show slightly different. I still think a lot of people would watch it. The probably the good example is probably Supercell,
Yeah.
that did just as well, really, if anything. And that was written obviously by Ratman. So it's
It
not
didn't do
given.
just as well.
Yes, it did.
No chance.
I don't think
Supercell
Supercell did as well
it
as
didn't do Top Boy numbers.
No.
No chance.
We'll
It
see
did.
about that.
I think
No,
it was.
no chance.
I think it was first. It was first in the charts for like a week. Maybe I saw that it was like
On the Netflix list.
trending
To
well.
be fair, compare Supercell's first season to Top Boy's first season.
Yeah.
Supercell is doing well. Definitely did better than Top Boy's first season.
Yeah, I don't know. We don't know the numbers,
Yeah,
right?
right.
In their final season, yeah. Okay,
We should
they've got 4 seasons.
we should fact check the numbers, but
Yeah, I know.
I think you're right, and I think from a quality perspective, it was probably better. but it's
And
interesting.
don't give him anything that Don't take it and run, you know.
I think to that point about Top Boy, so the only issue then that you have is that it's not black owned. Do you think it would have been a different narrative if it was black owned?
I didn't have the issue. I was using that as an example.
Okay.
I kind of didn't like Top Boy, to be fair.
Yeah, I know you didn't.
I didn't like it because I just felt like, what's the point in perpetuating this
Right. These stereotypes.
stereotypes?
Right.
But all the like media stuff that I saw them talking about was like, well, this is what East London's like.
Like, it does exist.
It
like,
exists. So we're shining a light on that. I didn't really understand why you have to shine a light on what we already know. But for them, it was, we're showing you what the ends that we grew up in and how we made it. And we're trying to show the youth that like, this is not the way you have to go, which is fine.
I always
you
hate
know.
that thing. Like,
I hate that.
I hate that.
Well,
I
this-
hate that word.
but
yeah.
to them, it's their intention, right? Like,
Yeah,
I
but
don't really
like,
get it because I would rather have a show about something that feels
aspirational.
aspirational.
Right,
precisely,
So you're
yeah.
showing them that no, all these black people that you think can't be in this space, you can be in this space, versus showing people a stereotype that they already associate with black people.
Exactly, and I think what it actually comes back to is that if you think about the economics of media, the person who dictates the content is the person who pays for it. So on Netflix are catering to their audience. Their audience have a certain idea of the black experience in inner London, inner city London. And if your show doesn't cater to that, to what they believe, the stereotypes that they have, it's not going to do as well. It's just that simple. And I think when we are within that sort of, that framework of like catering to a mass audience, we're always going to be beholden to that mass audience.
Yeah, but I think Netflix, to use Netflix example, if you can switch off Top Boy and then go on, I think there was another show about wealthy Nigerians. I mean, I thought it was a little bit like, I thought it was a little bit trashy.
Rich and African.
Young, rich and African.
Yeah. That was garbage. But, yeah.
I think that it was garbage in the way it was shot. I think it could
No, the content was also trash.
I think it, but
It was just reality TV, right?
But I'm just thinking about the concept. Those people are rich Africans.
Right, yeah.
So I would rather see that done in a more tasteful way,
Sure.
so that the youth, watching that are going like, oh, I can become a billionaire if I want to be. So I'm more into that.
I think Top Boy definitely has a place, or like those sort of shows definitely have a place. On to the final segment, which is the dilemma. You run a successful one-person media company through social media and art. A prominent media company, XYZ Limited, approaches to buy 25% of your venture in a non-negotiable deal that would be personally lucrative for you. Although XYZ promises to open your message up to new audiences without changing your content, the company has been accused of limiting individuals' creative control in the past. Do you accept the deal?
25% of the company.
25%.
That's a
You're
lot.
about to make a lot of money though.
That's not.
That doesn't drive with you.
That's not. Yeah, because the equity is what I care about, right? So, and I've created this company.
From the ground up.
I own it.
Yeah.
It's a media company, so there's a lot of IP content.
And art, yeah.
and you want to get 25% for a lot of money, and I don't have creative control.
Well,
No,
they
you do.
say you do, but like historically, this company's been a bit limited.
I think what I would do in this situation is shop around.
It's unlikely you would accept that the 25%.
No, without shopping around first and seeing if I can bring the equity down.
But say you get like similar in that similar sort of range.
I think that the word limiting, I'd have to investigate what that is and negotiate what that is, right? So if you're saying, okay, well, for this 25%, we're setting up a board of 4 white men that get to dictate to me, I would rather die. That's not right. But if you're saying to me, okay, we need a bit more say on, the creative, we need a bit more say on like when it launches, like those are compromises you can kind of make.
Yeah, I think I would reject the deal, but I guess the way I'm coming at this is like part of my existence in a sort of media space, for example, like on this show, is I see it as incumbent upon me to challenge white supremacy in what I say and like the topics that we talk about and the stances that I take. I see that as like my job. Like that's what I'm supposed to be doing in front of the camera. And if I'm not doing that, I'm a bit like, what's going on here? Like, why am I even opening my mouth? And there's a part of me that thinks if I took the white man's money, I can't do that anymore. I can't do both things. I can't challenge white supremacy and tell my audience, oh, actually, I'm owned by this white company, which does have all those white men on their board. Do you get what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, but this goes back to my point that like there are alternative finance options that are black owned and black controlled, right? So either way, like we don't live in a vacuum. So we have to do these transactions if we want to do what we want to do, right? Like, and we live in a capitalist structure. So there has to be an exchange and a transaction somewhere if you want to do what you want to do. But it's who you do it with. You might take their money, but it's very much on your terms.
Yeah.
I guess when I think about my audience members hearing about that deal, how would they feel? I'm just like,
but you see,
if I was the audience member, I'd be like, oh, fuck this nigga. Like, he's actually just snaked me.
Yeah, but you see, I always think this is really interesting. I think that pressure that you're putting on yourself, it's based on hypocrisy. Because you've just said, I can't look my audience in the eye, take money for my media from a white person or white corp company. So the pressure that audience is putting on you is dictating your decision. And I'm saying that audience, can they look themselves in the mirror and say, we don't benefit from a British society?
I guess I don't see myself as separate to the audience. I see myself as the audience as well.
No, same.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm a proud black Nigerian woman.
Of course.
But I grew up here.
But
and I represented England.
Absolutely, and I think we can draw the lines that we think are appropriate. I see the conflict there. And actually, I think that conflict that you're talking about is something that... So Paul Gilroy, he's an author who talks about the intersection between race, class, and politics for black people in the UK. And he has this term called the Black Atlantic, which is the sort of this double consciousness that people in the West who are black have, which is like we're part of the African diaspora, but we're also here. There's a Britishness in us that is undeniable that we can't...
For a long time, I didn't really know where I fit. Like it was kind of like, okay, like I'm not fully accepted as English, especially when you lose.
Yeah, of course.
When you lose, it's like Nigerian born. When you win, it's like, oh yeah, she's one of us. But then when I went to Nigeria when I was younger, I also didn't feel part of. So it was this in between, and so the double 100%. Consciousness.
Yeah.
But I think the solution to that is embracing all of it and saying, I am part of British culture with all the darkness that comes with that. You can do both. You know, I think we're often so binary in the way, you know, are you British? What are you? I'm both. You know, I'm British and Nigerian. Some people are 3, 4 different things.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that helps this sort of feeling of like conflict that you know you referenced.
Yeah, and I think one of the key takeaways that I have from what Paul Gilroy said in his book's actually called "There Ain't No Black in the Union Jack," which is like a racist chant that like people of that time, if he wrote the book in the 1980s, it was like considered a very controversial book at the time, but like you read it now, it's like, oh yeah, makes sense, common sense. But one of the things that he talks about is what you said about having the recognition, appreciation, and love for our African heritage. In the same way that white Britons have that same love for their heritage and their history here in England. We can't tap into that, and I don't think we should aspire to tap into that history because we're not part of that. I mean, if you look at that history, it exploits black people. And Gilroy makes the argument that blackness cannot be in Britishness in that way because Britishness is based on the exploitation of black people in the past. So for me, my takeaway from all of this to summarize is that we exist in the British context and the English context, but we have to critique it as we exist.
100%.
Like we have to continue
100%.
to challenge that, and it comes back to my answer of the scenario, is that because I see my place as someone that has to critique white supremacy, I just can't take the money because it undermines that crucial central message for me. I don't prescribe that on anyone else.
Yeah.
But for me, I take that so seriously and that I put that above the economic gain or like the prosperity of my venture. And I would die on that. I'll die on that sword.
I hear that.
Yeah.
I would say just the way the world works, the people who have made a lot of money are the ones who can actually challenge it the most.
I think while you guys have had the discussion, like something important is like come to me. Like I think there's just like we were talking about strategy earlier, like, and if we want to talk about how we strategically change these things, you have someone who does it one way and another person that does it another way, and I think
there's no wrong
both
answer.
ways are beneficial to create the change that you want to create, because the goal is still the same. It's just how we do it, right?
100%. My question always is, how do you make enough money in this capitalist society if you're
On the outside.
If you're on the outside?
I think the goal is to make change, right? Is to improve society for the better, for the black community. That's the goal that we both have. And if, two people are coming at it from different perspectives, that's absolutely fine. But I don't think we need to presume that money needs to come before the change. The change can happen without money.
I think we do have to have strategies as to how we're going to earn money to then have influence, to then make change.
I think if you're in the rooms and I'm on the streets, we can
come to...
Exactly.
That's why I came on this podcast.
And on that note, we actually have to end.
Yeah, we're going to wrap it up there.
Thank you for joining us at Think Twice. I hope you enjoyed yourself. Much love.
Take care. See you next week.
Thank you for having me, guys. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Sensational.
It was a pleasure to have you.
All right, lovely. Could you check the camera, please?
Does the cameras pick that up?
Oh, I'm a little bit stressed
Very
about
distracting.
that. Yeah.
For me as a black woman, I think it's important.
All right, cool. We'll get it done. Yeah, we have to take them out and redo it. Yeah. We've done 120 minutes.